Here's a charming, brief little note from the man I was courting. Letter writing is to me the most agreeable amusement, and writing to you the most entertaining and agreeable of all letter writing. He would sign his letters with the nom de plume Lysander, and I always signed mine with the name Diana. Well, he said we were like steel and magnet and thus must fly together. One night he demanded 1,000 kisses from me, for he had hardly gotten one for every one that he had given me. It was apparent we were to marry. And my mother was again concerned. You see, John was 9 years my senior. His father was but a deacon and a cobbler. My father was the minister at Weymouth, Massachusetts, and, well, by all accounts, a relatively wealthy man. Never mind, though. John was 9 years my senior, but my mother had married my father when he was 14 years older than she was, so she has no business talking. As far as my choice of man, I considered John Adams to be the most virtuous and kind gentleman that I had ever met. No, he did not appear in every aspect of grandism, but in his heart, in his soul, in his mind, he truly was the grandest of men. Well, as our courtship continued, I'm holding this letter. It's a most curious one. It could hardly really be considered a love letter in any way, but I did ask John that if I were to become a wife, I wanted to become the best possible wife that I could be. And while my mother presented an excellent example of wifedom and motherhood, I wanted John's opinion, so I asked for a catalogue of my faults. Imperfections, things upon which I could improve myself. I shall share some of them with you. In the first place, then, give me leave to say you have been extremely negligent in attending so little to cards. Yes, playing of cards. You have very little inclination to that noble and elegant diversion, and whenever you have held a hand, you've taken it but awkwardly and played it with a very uncourtly and indifferent air. Who knew card playing was to be the accomplishment of a fine wife? I had no idea. We never played cards in my house. Around my father's table, the understanding was that people would come to my mother and father's house and sit down and engage in lively discussion of the issues of the day. Though I can't tell you, since being married to John, how many times I have come to the home of a fellow lady in the community, only to find myself seated at a little four-square table with 3 practical strangers expected to engage in a game of whist for the remainder of the afternoon. And worse than that, my conversation included naught but idle chit-chat and gossip. I detest gossip. My father always said to make things and not people the subject of your conversation, and to speak ill of no one. I will say, though, having a good head for numbers, I do well in the betting. He goes on to say, you never could be prevailed upon to learn to sing. This I take to be an imperfection of the most moment. An ear for music, apparently, would be a source of much pleasure, and of great value when no other music could be had. Has anybody here ever heard the screech of a peacock on the lawn? Judging by your or perhaps an unhappy parrot in a cage. Well, that's how I liken the vocal stylings of Abigail Smith Adams, who will not be hearing me sing anytime soon. Let's see, he goes on to say, you very often hang your head like a bulrush, and you do not sit erect as you ought, by which means it happens that you appear too short for a beauty. I think there's a compliment in this. Another fault is that of sitting with the legs across. Let's see, here we are. This ruins the figure and the air, and thus injures the health. Oh, not, ladies, he says. This springs from too much thinking. Go ahead, keep your head. Another fault, apparently, is walking with the toes bending inwards. He places, this imperfection is commonly called parrot toad. I distinctly recall writing back that a gentleman ought not to be concerning himself so much about the legs of a young lady. We were married in October of 1764.